live today with Deepak Anand, VP of Government Relations with CCI. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Deepak, it's been an absolute monumental last week. October 17th, Canada went fully legal with cannabis throughout the entire country. But there are so many different stories to touch on. All of our investors and viewers right now, we all know what's going on with the market. It's been quite red over the last few days, but the industry itself is just getting started. And I thought we'd bring you on and talk a little bit more about that.
Absolutely, yeah. Lots of headlines, certainly a lot of excitement around cannabis legalization. But I mean, there's a lot happening in the background on licensing with Health Canada. There's quite a few things happening around the world with medical cannabis legalization. So happy to talk about that in today's show.
Yeah, well, why don't we start exactly how you started with licensing, because that's a huge concern for not only a lot of these LP hopefuls who have been working for a long time, building their facilities, working with your company, among others, but CCI has always been one of those main brand names that people really want to see connected to their people looking to get through the ACMPR program. But can you go a little bit more into, what's going on with Health Canada right now? Are we getting more coming online? Is there a panic? Where do you see things as of this moment?
Well, certainly, if you look at sort of last week, particularly the 15, 16, 17, which was the last few days before legalization, we saw a whole bunch of licenses come on board. In fact, on those last few days, we saw more licenses handed out than any other day since the ACMPR or the MMPR was launched. So that was quite telling and signaling that Health Canada was certainly doing a lot to get as many licenses out of the gates at the very last minute. And there's a lot happening in the background. I mean, Health Canada has hired a battery of people towards licensing to deal with not just the new licensing categories that have come online on the 17th, but also, more importantly, to deal with some of the backlog on applicants that have been waiting in the queue for a very long time. And most importantly, people that are currently either have cultivation licenses that don't currently have sale licenses, or existing LPs that are looking to expand through their second site applications, or are looking simply to expand their current growing rooms. And every time that you've got a new growing room that comes online or a new area that comes online where cannabis is going to be present, you need to apply to Health Canada to get those approvals. So Health Canada is certainly doing a lot in the background. I mean, there's clearly a number of cultivation license holders today that have quite a bit of product actually in stock that aren't allowed to sell it either through wholesale to other licensed producers or directly to the provincial governments. But you can expect over the next few weeks that you will see more sale licenses come out where Health Canada is going to turn these people that have been cultivating cannabis now for many, many months, and in many cases that have access to a variety of product, you'll see that turn online pretty quickly, and that will help ease some of this shortage.
Yeah, and the exact word, shortage. You've already seen some articles. We all knew this was coming, though. We understood it's going to be a process because there's a lot of demand that's in here. And a lot of these companies, actually, especially larger ones, are also looking into export deals as well. So it's not just domestic demand, it's global demand. But it's interesting to hear that because there's probably a lot of people right now, or a lot of companies that do have stock and can't get out there because these articles are saying, there's people out in different provinces where it's the retail stores, they're completely dry. Or you go to other things, they had 20 or 30 different offerings to begin with. Now they've got 5 or 7. Do you see that changing anytime soon? Or do you think this is we're going to have a supply issue for at least 3 to 6 months, if not a little bit longer?
Yeah, I think we'll still have a supply issue for the next little while. And, I would say 6 to 8 months if I was to guess. I mean, let's not forget that there's other international markets that are coming online. And the only thing that licensed producers can actually export from Canada is medical cannabis. They can't export non-medical cannabis. So we're certainly going to see, a variety of product being, sort of moved into these areas that are sort of, almost at this point, commanding a high premium on products. So, where you need to sell to a provincially authorized distributor at between $4 and $6 a gram, you can now retail this or wholesale this into European markets at $7, $8, $9 a gram in many cases. So we're certainly seeing a lot of interest from the international markets come online. The UK just announced that as of November 1st, they're going to be allowing for medical cannabis to be prescribed in the UK, and that they're going to be banking on imports to a great extent to kind of address some of their issues. And what we're seeing directly, I mean, yesterday, someone tweeted out there was one licensed producer that had no medical cannabis available for people in Canada, which is quite concerning to a certain extent. But it sort of indicates the pressure that's being placed on some of these licensed producers that have product, particularly those that are able to export, that have something called GMP, good manufacturing practices that allow them to export into these medical cannabis markets. And what we're seeing is, they're getting, a significant premium on their products. So for the current sort of point where there's a supply crunch, it makes more sense for some of these producers to be exporting some of this medical cannabis rather than supplying it domestically, either to the medical channel or even the non-medical recreational channel.
Yeah, and it's a really good point as well, because the margins are so much higher in places like Germany and soon to be UK, and there's so many different other countries that are coming online. I mean, that's a whole other conversation we can go into about just the global cannabis space and how that's working. But when it comes to actual supply, yeah, if you're a company and you've got the ability to sell something wholesale for $7, $8, $9, or sell retail or wholesale in Canada for $4 or $5, what company is going to be saying, you know what, no, it's going to all stay in Canada? Very few, if not any. They're going to want to export. So it just really goes to show that exports are so important to these Canadian companies, which goes on an overarching theme as well, that these U.S. companies are out there. Trulieve, you've got these massive NPX Biosecure, these guys are really starting to get a lot of market share out there, and they're making some great revenues. Charlotte's Web's the other one I was thinking of, but they still can't export. So it's just interesting, it's a crazy dynamic, but you're saying for the next foreseeable future, we probably are going to see a shortage in Canada, though, which I think many of us were prepared for regardless.
Yeah, it was something that was very much expected, and it's no surprise that we're seeing this supply crunch currently. But I mean, this was kind of predicted and expected all along.
No, exactly. Now, for CCI, how many companies do you currently have on the go for trying to bring through that ACMPR progress? Are you seeing that you're still getting more people apply than approve? Obviously, I can imagine that's true, but are you seeing a trend? Are you seeing a lot more being approved recently, or a lot more applying, or less applying? Is there a trend that's going on right now?
We're certainly seeing a lot more people submitting applications. So on October 17th, the ACMPR was sort of replaced with the Cannabis Act. And what we've seen is there was a number of people that either were what was previously the black market, now start to apply for micro sort of licenses, both on the cultivation and the production side, and in some cases standard cultivators and processors. But really what Health Canada has done on October 17th was issued 10 new classes of licenses. So if you just wanted to be a grower and not worry about all of the other things, including sale and quality assurance and all that stuff, then you don't need to do that anymore. The previous ACMPR was a fully vertically integrated system, so you needed to do everything from sort of grow your crop till the time that you find customers to sell it to, and that would include the marketing and the shipping and all these things, whereas now Health Canada sliced and diced it. So basically, if you just want to be in one side of the value chain, then that's all you can do. If you just want to be a grower, then you can do that. Or if you just want to be sort of on the marketing or sales side, then that's all you could do. So we've certainly been inundated with companies that have been holding out and waiting for this model to launch. But as far as existing applicants are concerned, there's still several hundred people in the queue that have been waiting for a very long time. That we're seeing a lot of movement on with Health Canada, and there are parts of the Cannabis Act that require sort of new information to be sent into Health Canada. There's new security clearance protocols and forms that need to be filled out. So we're quite busy doing that, but Health Canada is certainly very committed to getting this regime on board. They realize that there needs to be more licenses handed out, as much as they want to make sure that sort of the new applicants and new licenses are brought on board, and people that have historically grown in the black market need to be brought on board. They also realize that there's this sort of backlog, if you will, of licenses that need to clear through. So certainly a lot of willingness that we're seeing from Health Canada, and they're pushing along quite well, I would say, and we've certainly been busy, as I can imagine they have been.
Yeah, and I love that too. I love the idea that they're allowing these extra licenses. Pat, I hope I can remember his last name properly, McCutcheon. He's the CEO of MetaPharm. A lot of people, and sorry Pat if I got your last name wrong there, I'm going from memory here. A lot of people really, really were excited to see that they got their oils license without being a cultivator, because a lot of companies are going to be like, you know what? I think either this is going to be saturated very soon with these larger players who have these massive facilities that are being built, not there yet, but going to be built, but or they just say, you know what? I don't want to be a part of growing the flower. I think it's going to be a commodity one day. I'd rather extract it and go into the the business of CBD oils, THC oils. Maybe you're putting concoctions for drinks. You hear Bruce Linton talking about that all the time. We're currently going through a supply issue with flower. Do you think, though, this will help the government say, you know what, we should look into these distillates. We should look into these other forms that people would rather take or consume cannabis with, whether it's medical or recreation, and they see that as almost like a way out of the supply issue because now you're going to have multiple avenues to get there?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that Health Canada is very much considering. I mean, we all know that edibles and concentrates are going to be legalized in October of 2019. So it's something that Health Canada is looking at very closely. And, there's already discussions happening. I think I would expect either by sort of the end of the year or early next year, we'll see draft regulations on edibles and concentrates come out. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that they are very much sort of attuned to. It's something that we can expect coming out very soon. And I think that will help some of these supply issues, these supply crunches sort of be addressed, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And also not even just supply issues. I mean, even just from a consumer, there's a lot of people out there who would much rather go through an oil, a capsule, a spray. There were some sprays out there instead of going to smoking. There's always going to be a stigma around smoking, but also a huge craze I'm seeing everywhere. I know it's probably, well, it is black market and gray market, but vape pens. They've exploded into the market through these different dispensaries. As someone who follows the industry, do you see that being a really big component of these LPs moving forward, or concentrated vape pens?
Absolutely. I think we already saw some announcements early this week and last week around, people looking at vapes and concentrates. And certainly, I mean, if you look at U.S. states that have legalized cannabis for non-medical purposes, I mean, the big seller is not flower or oil. It seems to be concentrates, vapes, edibles, and those sorts of products. So it's only natural that we'll see that happen here. I mean, if you look at, historically the black market in Canada, and I'm in Vancouver, so I certainly see this firsthand, the products that are available and that are selling are those products, are those vapes, are those concentrates, are those edibles. So, we can certainly expect that, to take firm shape in the legal market here once Health Canada sort of allows for a regulatory pathway for that to happen. And it's no surprise that we're seeing, U.S. companies come to Canada. I mean, sure, the listing and the stock exchange and capital raising is certainly a big factor for them coming here. But what we're seeing is a number of them are getting into IP licensing deals with licensed producers, where they're bringing that expertise and that experience from the U.S., where they've done it, fairly well over the past few years, and saying, hey, let's replicate this in Canada, and let's partner up either with a licensed producer or in some cases do it directly ourselves and kind of bring this to market, because they realize that there's an opportunity here, not just in the Canadian market, but also in the international markets from an export perspective, particularly on those lines that would be considered medical cannabis, which they'd be allowed to export.
Well, exactly. I mean, what's easier, transporting flour that can easily go bad and be damaged, whatever, or transport a liquid that's already set, whether it be with a certain, I know a lot of these medical companies and cannabis companies actually are coming up with these different aspects that help it to keep its chemical compound longer, especially when it's in liquid form. So I can imagine it only makes sense if you're doing a case of little capsules of liquid, or you're trying to transport a few kilos of cannabis that's been suppressed in like an air vacuum pack. One's going to have better quality than the other when it gets there.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, even the existing sort of models allow for things like suppositories and other forms of products that, it's been surprising not to see an existing licensed producer look at developing those formulations. I mean, we've seen a few licensed producers like Hydropothecary and Aurora get pretty creative with a sublingual spray and kief and chata for a brief period. But I mean, we're clearly seeing a lot of people get creative and come out with these new lines of products that the market, so desperately needs. So, what we'll see in a year from now is going to look drastically different than what we're seeing today. And again, this is not something that's unique to Canada. We've already seen this happen in jurisdictions that have legalized, particularly in the U.S. When you look at California in particular, I mean, if you want to know the future of cannabis and cannabis products, just go to California. Not so much from a regulatory perspective, but certainly from a product perspective. I mean, on the product development side, California is doing a phenomenal job on product formulations, and we're seeing a lot of very interesting products coming out, including beverages that we've talked about quite a bit in the Canadian scene, with likes of Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Diageo and some other big bev alcohol companies coming into the space.
Yeah, and I hope so too, because I'm actually speaking. So I mean, through our community at Follow the Money, we speak to a lot of people, whether it be consumers, investors. We want to find out what people are talking about. But just looking at my Facebook feed and looking at people who, 4 years ago when I started investing in cannabis, like they weren't even anywhere on Facebook talking about it. Now they're experts or they're whatever it be. But some of them are making really good points, though, is that when you look at the market we've created, the black market and gray market can thrive in this. We've got grams of cannabis going for like $18 a gram. The selection is completely like it's old strains, or it's taking like it's being sold out really quickly. But the biggest aspect is not having these products, not having these alternatives that these dispensaries they've already got. Not to mention, when you're looking at this and you're looking at the framework of marketing and all of that, how are you ever going to beat a black market dealer when you completely handcuff these LPs into not being able to talk about their products, not being able to offer more products, and then the taxation? A lot of different things piled into that comment there, but the reason I bring that up is that I wanted to ask, do you hear of anything? Are they speaking in government, in our government right now, saying, hey, you know what, we might have gone a little bit too strict on this whole cannabis marketing aspect. We might have to loosen this up.
Look, the intention always was, I mean, we knew very early on from when the task force was formed and the Liberal government came out with this, they said we're going to very strictly enforce this and regulate it, and it will ease over time. And, I don't think we're certainly seeing any relaxation at this point, particularly on the marketing and sales and packaging and branding side. But what we are seeing is, if you look at from a regulatory perspective, I mean, where we were about a year ago and even 2 years ago, a lot of the regulations required for LPs to set up these massive industrial scale malls that were very expensive, to begin with, that have now sort of been taken away. And Health Canada says, okay, we've looked at this from a risk-based scenario, and we realize that you don't need to have these industrial malls that are level 7, 8, 9 in many cases, and that's a bit of an overkill. And so they've sort of relaxed those requirements. We've seen the ability where you needed to have a security cleared person called a PIC in every room where cannabis was present, to now saying, okay, well, you just need one person per site. So we're certainly seeing a lot of proactive developments from Health Canada based on risk-based approach, where they've seen this program for the past 4 years. They've said, okay, well, these are some things that I think we probably went too aggressive on, and we can afford to now step back on that. And I think we'll see the same on the sort of marketing and enforcement side. I think once we realize that, look, we've achieved most of our basic objectives with legalization, one of them being keeping cannabis out of the hands of kids, then we will be able to sort of relax this over time and kind of, roll this back. And I think Health Canada and the federal government completely realize that some of these LPs are being handcuffed, particularly when you look at the black market. And now the black market is not really dispensaries that are selling product illegally. It's actually websites that are selling cannabis online that will deliver to you. I mean, they're completely in the shadows, and it's very hard to sort of go after them and aggressively enforce them. When from an average consumer perspective, you could sit back in your home and Canada Post will deliver you your legal cannabis on one side and your illegal cannabis on the other. And in many cases, consumers don't know the difference between the two. So we will see that relaxation over time. I think as we look at edibles legislation coming in, we look at these other forms of products coming in, I think the next thing Health Canada will start to look at is how to sort of, not just eliminate the black market on one hand, but allow for the illicit market to compete with that.
Why don't we call it there? I had a good question for you, but it's just eluded me. But I'm sure we'll get you back on here many times to come, because there's a lot of different questions to ask as we continue to go into legalization and how it's progressing and the issues that come up, but also the things that really went well. So I'm sure we'll have more conversation about this very soon as well.
Indeed, many more conversations to happen. Thanks for having me.